Go, Create. This is your host, Tim Winders. This is where we redefine success in leadership, business, and in ministry. And we're going to be doing that today. We're going to be talking about I believe, a very different take and unique take on leadership. We'll get to our guest in just a moment. But before we do that, I'm going to ask one big favor of you. And that is, if you haven't done so already, go to seekgocreate.com/book. That's seekgocreate.com/book. And that is where you can go and find out all that you need to about Tim Winders, my debut novel. Yeah, you heard that right. I've actually written a novel. I thought that I would write a nonfiction book. First book that's out of the gate is a fiction book. It's fiction with purpose, though. And depending on when you listen in, depending on when you go to that link, depending on when you're hearing this, you will either be able to get a download of the first chapter, or if it's after the release of the book, which is later in 2021, depending on when you're listening, you can actually find out all about where you can get the book. So I appreciate you doing that. I look forward to the feedback, look forward to hearing all that you have to say about it. So thanks for doing that. Let's go ahead and get started. This is going to be a lot of fun today. We have Dr. Trevor Blattner as our guest. He's a business coach, author, founder of Redefining the Top 1%, and he's a shepherd leader. And he's got a bio that has a lot of other stuff in it, but we're going to go ahead and dive right in. Trevor, welcome to Seek, Go, Create.
Hey, Tim, thanks for having me. Very cool to be on live too. I didn't even know that was going to be part of the deal. So that's another aspect. And also congrats on your novel. I've not tackled fiction yet myself. So I'm sure that was fascinating to do, but a huge accomplishment. So
yeah, it is. And actually, it was much different from me. I thought that I've done a lot of things in the leadership arena. We're going to talk about that here, I know. And one of the things that I always thought was that I would do something like that. Well, a story came to me first that would get some principles across, kind of a Ogmandino type story, and greatest salesman in the world. So that's what it is. So anyway, but enough about me. Let's talk about you. First question I like to ask you and I kind of gave an abbreviated bio because I wanted to hear this. And that is, we bump into each other. You and I are out and about, something like that. And I say, Trevor or Dr. Trevor, what do you do? And what do you typically tell people when people ask you that?
Well, I live in a small town, so a lot of people kind of know what I do. But when I'm out away from where I'm from, I do several things. One, I'm an endodontist. And if you've not been to the endodontist before, you probably aren't familiar with what that is, but that's a root canal specialist. So, so I get most of my patients, I get all my patients actually from other dentists that will send them to me to take care of a specific problem for their patient, and then send them back and make them feel better and be happy. So I have my own practice, and that's kind of where I initially, 8 years ago, I started the practice from scratch. It was just me and one other person, and that's where I started to learn how important leadership principles and understanding how to lead others, was, and that's kind of where I got involved with the John Maxwell team and started diving in deep to what does it take to be a leader, and how do you get better at that all the time. I also am a real estate investor, so I have kind of got a little bit of a business going on that from that standpoint, investing in apartment buildings, and then also I do business coaching as well. So I'm actually a member of a group called Gravitas Premium Coaches, which is basically a coaching program platform. Specifically for CEOs and small business owners. So we help people with their personal growth, but also the growth of their business in general.
Yeah, that's good. So you're somewhat of a Renaissance man, a lot going on there.
I guess so. I have a lot of interests. I have been diagnosed with ADHD actually. So that's a new thing. Yeah, I didn't even know that was a thing. When I was a kid, that was never something that I thought was part of my life. But it can be really powerful though, if you're able to challenge it and kind of know how to deal with it. So for me, having multiple things like that as projects at any given time actually helps, and it helps me to be more productive. So
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say that's good, but I don't know. I guess it is. And really, I think what we
It
find, you
can
probably
be,
find,
yeah.
yeah, I think what you probably find is the more you work with business leaders and all, there is a certain degree of that with the entrepreneur, business person, leader. And this is the way I state it, and maybe you would agree, disagree. I'm cool with it either way. Is that's probably our greatest strength, but it could also be our kryptonite. you know,
Oh,
uh,
absolutely, 100%. And if it's not understood, if there's not a lot of self-awareness around it,
yeah,
I think that, and if there's not a lot of delegation around it, I think that it can definitely be kryptonite. And
yeah.
it has been for me in different cases. So I know it can happen.
Sure. Speaking of self-awareness and leadership, there's something that I saw on you when I was doing my research and reading through your book that we'll talk about in just a moment. Is that you're married and you have 3 daughters? Is that correct? Did I read that correctly?
I do. Yeah. I have an 8-year-old Kate, a 6-year-old Nora, and a 3.5-year-old Lena. And
Wow.
no boys, just girls at our house.
So here's
So
my first like big learning point leadership question is
yeah.
what's it like? Well, I'll even ask you this way. Are you the leader of that home or are you like the bottom? I mean, how does that work?
It is a daily learning experience. Let me put it that way. Actually, the most dominating personality in our house, which many might guess, is the 3.5-year-old.
Mm,
She was just born sort of an alpha personality type, and so she's not scared of anything, and she's very much a daddy's girl. And so really my younger two are both daddy's girls. My oldest is a people pleaser right now, so she never wants to make mommy sad, so she likes to make sure mom feels loved and all that, which is good. But it is, I mean, I think that it is easier in many ways to be the leader at your place of business, and work environment, than it is at home, at least in my experience, because it's a different. You're able to get away with a little bit different style of leadership,
right.
and personality challenges can be more difficult to deal with at home. So
Well, what I was really, this is my hard question here. You've written a book on leadership. We're going to be talking about
yeah.
redefining the top 1%. We're going to talk about being a shepherd leader. And I was just really wanting to ask, does all that work, does it apply to a home where you're a male in a house with 4 women?
I think that it does apply. I would say the main reason I wrote this book is not because I'm an expert.
Mm,
It's actually because I wanted to learn about what do the experts say about what's effective in the world of leadership, and are there particular behaviors, as I termed them in the book, that leaders have at the highest level that are common, and are those backed by scientific evidence? And by nature, I went to residency, and I wrote peer-reviewed articles and all those things for journals, and so I'm a researcher kind of by training and by nature, being in the medical field, and so that part was very natural for me when I wrote the book, and putting those findings together into a kind of a set of behaviors in the book was natural. Now, taking those and using them every single day actively uh, isn't necessarily an easy thing. It's an ideal, it's an ideal we set up for ourselves, and I think that each of us individually have our own cross to bear, in terms of the things that we struggle with, and the areas where we're not as strong. But knowing what the ideal looks like is I think the first step.
yeah. And I love the thought of, setting the bar and then all of us knowing that part of what we're doing is a journey to get there. There's
Mhm.
a couple things. And again, I've actually got some highlights from the book that I want us to address shortly. But
Cool.
there's a few foundational things. I mean, one of the things we talk about a good bit here on the show, the podcast, is redefining success and things like that. And when I do, here's what I do, Trevor. When I go do some research, I just look for some clues of things that intrigue me. And so there's a couple things that I want to ask about to kind of learn more about Trevor, to kind of build
Yeah.
up. And the first thing that was kind of interesting to me, I saw the statement somewhere. It might have been on your website. I don't know if it was in your bio or somewhere, but it was something to the effect of, there were three words: character, morality, and truth.
Mm.
And truth was capitalized. And so I just wanted to ask you a little bit about that. And then I think I might have a follow-up to it, but tell us what, I can't remember the context that I saw it in. I think it was something that you were just sharing about what you were all about or what you were passionate about. Maybe if I'm wrong, let me know, but character, morality, and truth. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think that is probably on the homepage of the website at the bottom, and it's sort of like the mission statement of what it is that we're trying to do, with redefining the top 1%. And a lot of the things that I seek to learn and improve upon are because I want my girls, my kids, to grow up in a world that's as good as it can be, and be surrounded by people that enrich their lives, rather than make them more difficult. And those three words are sort of the ideal, character, morality, and truth. With the idea being that there is one, universal truth. Truth is not relative. Now, many would argue with that. I happen to be the type of person that does believe that truth is not relative. I think that there is one single truth that is given by the Creator God, that is sort of our clue to how to live life in the most ideal way possible. So those ideas of character, morality, and truth are, what I strive to get better at. They're certainly, and to display. And I've fallen in major ways in my life, and probably won't be finished falling, in my life. But it's, again, that ideal that we're trying to set up for ourselves, so that we can be the person that our kids deserve, our spouses deserve, our teams deserve.
Yeah. Well, the great thing is it jumped out at me, and I don't know if it jumped out at me because I'm like going, yes, or that I don't see that written as much. And it could be that I just don't see it written down like that way as much anymore.
Mm.
And it's almost as if, as you were speaking, and again, maybe this is my worldview, that I'm kind of looking around at all that's going on now, and I'm almost seeing it shrink the people that can speak to things like that. And maybe it's just who I hang out with. I don't know. Maybe you have a different view. I'd love to know. But kind of the question related to that is, how do we measure those things in our current culture, the current world that we're in? Because there's a lot going on right now.
There is a lot going on. In terms of metrics, those are very subjective things. And so to use objective tools to measure them, I think is probably doable, but it may be outside of my ability to understand exactly how to do that. But I do think that, part of it comes down to authenticity, and also the ability to understand, when we are mistaken as individuals, when we maybe aren't right and think that we are, being open to the idea that there may be knowledge out there and truth out there that is, that we've not been exposed to before. And me being a person of, I guess, curiosity, I always like to dig in and look and see what proof there is or there is not about a particular stance on truth. And so that's that portion of it. As far as character and morality go, that's a tougher question, because I think we recognize character when we see it. And probably the same is true for morality. But even then, morality is even more relative now in our current climate than maybe it's ever been. Certainly, and since it's been in my own life experience, it's more relative than it's ever been.
Right. And listen, those words are great words when we start layering those in when we have this discussion about leadership.
Mhm.
And so kind of a big, I like to sometimes do macro before we kind of drill down to some micro items, but big picture, when you look out across the landscape and you're in, kind of middle America is where you are, but you look across the landscape, you look at leadership as far as companies, you probably see a lot of smaller business people, which I think is a good thing, by the way. That's what I see
Mhm.
also. But then you look at corporations, you look at politicians, you look at world leaders, et cetera. What is your gauge? And I know this is probably just Trevor's thoughts on
Sure.
the current state of leadership in the world. I love to ask that question just to see what
Yeah.
people say.
I mean, I do think it's different at different levels. And I
Yeah.
think that I think that our leaders at the highest level, I guess the most visible level, um, for quite some time, have been lacking
Mm.
in character. I think certainly that one is something that that our young people in the country, and even not so young people, we recognize that when that's not where it needs to be. And we also, whether we realize it or not, we follow the lead of those people that are at the top, and we use them as sort of barometers for what we think is acceptable. And so I think that has been a real problem. I think I live in middle America, I live in the Bible Belt. And so I think at the level of small businesses in my own community, um, I would say the exact opposite is the case. For the majority of the people that I know personally that own businesses, their highest priority is to take care of their employees and their employees' families, and and their own families. And so um, I don't necessarily know that's a metropolitan thing versus a rural thing, or a geographical thing, but I do think that um, for one reason or another, we've allowed ourselves to create a situation where the leaders at the highest level are maybe not what we're striving to have for the long term.
Yeah. And I'm almost wondering, to put words in your mouth, if it's a media thing, that
Yeah.
when we start looking at media, we only see certain lack of character, lack of integrity on whatever side. This is not a political discussion, but
That's right.
and I'm excited when I get to do things like tomorrow. I have the honor of speaking at a local Rotary Club meeting here in this town I'm in outside of Atlanta, and
Mhm.
I'm excited about getting around those people because it's kind of what you just described. It's people that are overseeing. They've got responsibility for their organization, and they treat it like, is a word we use later, like a good shepherd. So I'm excited about that.
Well, that's exactly right. Yeah, and I was just gonna just say, I do think you're right in terms of the media. I mean, how often does the media highlight, a Rotary Club, or
Yeah.
the things that are going on in a small community that are positive? That's just not what you see,
No.
and so that is a very good point.
Yeah, I will not have to beat my way through the paparazzi to get to the Rotary Club meeting at
You
7
will
AM
not.
in the morning.
You will not. No, no,
No, not at
it'll
all.
be very, very easy to get there tomorrow morning.
Yeah. So, all right. All right. Excellent discussion about kind of bigger picture, but I want to start drilling down to Trevor, and really specifically, I think I saw somewhere that your dad's name was Rick. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So your dad's name was Rick. And I think I heard you somewhere, it might've been a video or something that I saw. You talked a little bit about Rick, and a little bit, I think this would be a great conversation for you to talk about your father and talk
Yeah.
about the evolution of leadership,
Yeah.
because leadership has changed a good bit. I'm the
Yeah.
tail end
Yeah.
of the baby boomer. I'm 57, about to be 58 years old. And there was this mindset of don't let anybody see you bleed for the longest, tough, authoritarian leadership that then went to servant, all these things. So maybe using your father, if that's okay, could you talk a little bit about the evolution of leadership?
Yeah, absolutely. And even he and I have had this discussion quite a bit, as I was writing this book and coming up with the ideas, putting them together. And I actually asked his permission, to say, hey, is it okay if I mention some of these things in the book that I think are important for people to hear, especially those that are up and coming, leaders that maybe aren't really sure, what leadership should look like. And my dad, in many ways, well, so he's a steel guy. So he's an engineer by training, but he started his own business from the ground up in steel fabrication. So basically, that is cutting and specifying steel pieces for specific jobs like bridges and buildings, and then they
pretty
do
tough
all the
work,
welding.
right?
Very
hard
tough
work,
work.
right?
Very hard work, and just aren't a lot of people that do that kind of work, anymore. It's a unique kind of a business, and so. But he, at this point in his career, he's about to retire. He's turning 65, but he still works about 4 days a week. And he has, I think, about 20, at any given time, between 25 and 30 employees. A lot of those are guys in the shop doing welding and those kinds of things. And so it is tough work. It is at times a tough group of people. And as I grew up, and he's also he's a hard-nosed guy, and I think probably by necessity in many ways. His dad, my grandpa, probably had a lot to do with that. He was a brigadier general in the National Guard, and was a very, hardworking guy. I don't recall ever seeing him alive not working on something. It just wasn't a guy that did anything, for relaxation or anything like that. And he was also not a very touchy-feely person. He was very intense. And so my dad got a lot of his leadership style from his dad. When I was growing up, when I would go to his shop or even around our house, the way he has a very alpha approach to leadership and a very, authoritarian style. And I think it was very subconscious. I don't think it was intentional. I think that to him, that was what leadership was. And that's just the only way it's done. As you said, that has evolved over time. Certainly, I think, Ken Blanchard and others sort of brought the idea of servant leadership forward, over the last, 20 to 25 years. And that caught on very well. And I think it's a very, very good concept. And I think that people on teams respond really well, to that idea of the leader at the top as a servant to those, on their team and their organization. And really, this idea of shepherd leadership is not even a term that I actually came up with. This is a term that I and it's not even necessarily original, but a friend of mine that was helping me kind of put these ideas together suggested that I use that term because, these ideas are very, they are biblical in many ways, and we look at characters like King David, Moses, Jesus is the good shepherd, all of these major characters in the Bible have a link to shepherd, being a shepherd at some point in their lives. And I think this idea of shepherd in the sense of, yes, servant, certainly, but also someone that sort of charts the course, sort of creates the path forward, and also protects in many ways. I think that not only is serving, but I think also the role of a leader in this day and age is to be, protective and be sort of a mentor to those people on their team as far as possible. And so that's kind of where that extra extension of the shepherd leadership concept comes in.
Yeah. And I love thanks for talking about your father and all, because I think that gives value. And I think it bridges some generations, because I love you going back to your grandfather, because, it was effective, I think, in their world. They probably weren't
extremely
emotional guys. Yeah. I doubt any of them walked in and say, hey, listen, let's have a meeting. I want to check in with everybody and see how everybody's feeling and all. I doubt that happened
No.
in the steel fabrication business. And but yet that's kind of common in more business practices today. But the thing I want to kind of go into, and I was going to go into it later, but you opened the door for it, is I wanted to ask you about that term shepherd.
Yeah.
I'm a follower of Christ. You're a follower of Christ. We have a lot of listeners that are too. And
Yeah.
so they naturally say, oh, shepherd, I know what that means. You
Mhm.
described it a little bit, but outside of biblical circles in 2021, 22, whenever people are listening in here,
Yeah.
there aren't a lot of shepherds out there tending their flocks or their sheep. And so a lot of people maybe don't quite grasp what that means. Have you run across
Yeah.
anyone that you did a great job of describing it earlier, but have you run across anyone, groups of people or anyone that said, what the heck are you talking about, this shepherd thing?
Sure. Yeah. No. And I think that is, I think initially that's why I didn't personally come, you know, that wasn't a term that I was using initially myself,
Mm,
but, enough people told me that is really the right fit for, the type of person that I'm really trying to reach.
mm.
That I kind of went with it. And definitely, I mean, it's not a term that's really, it's just not used in the current environment. But I also think it's a little bit misunderstood in terms of what a shepherd really does. I mean, it's
Yeah.
these a shepherd is a very tough, I mean, a defender. I mean, like David, regularly would fight lions to protect his flock. And so it's really the idea of putting oneself on the line
Mm.
whenever necessary for the good of the rest of the team, or in the
Yeah.
case of a shepherd for the flock. Um, and so those terms can be interchangeable, but
Mm.
I think that's the key component that maybe people don't think of initially.
Yeah, I love the term. I love the way you use the word strength, because one of the things I was sitting here thinking I was gonna ask, do people perceive a shepherd as being weak? And you addressed it right there. And there's a great parable that Jesus talks about, that the shepherd leaves the flock of 99 to find the one that's missing. And obviously those numbers aren't that critical. It just shows how what a overseer the shepherd is,
Hmm.
which I think it would be kind of funny. Wouldn't it be kind of interesting if you and I loaded up, went to Northern Virginia, DC, and started walking around saying, hey, listen, we're looking for the shepherd leaders that are here in Washington and all. And I'd be curious as to what kind of looks we might get. That would be kind of,
I think it would be very. I think what kind of looks we would get,
I
and
know
I
what
know
we'd
too.
get.
I know
But
too.
it'd be kind of fun. I think you and I'd have
It
fun with it.
would.
So,
It really
so
would.
all right. I love the shepherd leadership, but we're gonna kind of use that as a foundation to move into talking about this redefining the 1%.
Yeah.
And you may know that one of our subtitles at Seek Go Create is Redefine Success. And you've got a book now that's called Redefine the Top 1%. And you talk a lot about the American dream and all that. But here's my first question before we kind of start really diving into the book. Anytime someone uses a word like redefine,
Yeah.
it's almost automatic that they're saying there's something wrong with the current way it's being defined.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
Hmm.
doing. Are you doing the
Hmm.
same thing? Are you saying something ain't right about the way it is? It needs to be redefined. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, and I think also the perception of what it means to be in the 1% is it's very negative.
Mm.
So and I think a lot of that is media driven. As we've talked about before, but I think a lot of people at this point have this idea that the 1%ers are sort of an elite, elitist group of people that want nothing good for anyone other than themselves. And I think that what we try to do in the book, number one, is look at the idea of each of us individually striving to reach that sort of top performance bar in our own lives. That top 1% of our own ability, God-given ability and talent, so that then we can move into the upper echelon in terms of our ability to provide for our families, our ability to lead, successful organizations, and then ultimately our ability to do good things for other people through generosity and through gifts and through programs we're able to help create. Because I think we can all understand that if we're unable to take care of ourselves financially and otherwise, we really aren't equipped to do things for others in a powerful way. And so I think it's just a fundamental truth. And I think that redefining the top 1% in those two different ways was really the goal of this book.
So to clarify, typically someone listening in, if we title this something about the top 1%, people are going to think we're talking about the people that earn, the top earners, the Forbes
Sure.
or whatever those lists are. So this is not about money, correct?
Well, it's not, but for the record, I don't personally have a problem with anyone that earns a lot of money.
Yeah.
Now, in fact, I think that's a great thing, provided that their motives are pure and that they're trying, to use those resources in a way that benefits others and mankind in general. And I think a lot of people that are in that category do that. I think they give away a lot more money than any of us realize and do great things. But there are certainly that group of people that are not in that category. But to answer your question, this is not specifically about that. It is about trying to adopt behaviors that we know from science are in line with the most successful people in leadership positions over the course of time. So how can we each incorporate these behaviors into our lives on a daily basis through the exercises that we have in the book to then, get as close to that top 1% of our own ability to create and perform and provide as we can.
Yeah. And so one interesting thing about it, and there's layers of this throughout the book, but I think I like to ask this of people in your position, because I think it's valuable to someone listening in. We just had a brief money discussion and we've talked about faith. We talked earlier about capital T, truth and character, morality, things like that. I love to ask people that are in positions like you're in, that are in you're a doctor, you're running an organization, you're interacting with other organizations, you're investing, you're doing a lot of things. How do you bring together? And you mentioned you were in the Bible Belt, so that actually adds a little bit of kindling to the fire. How do you bring together faith, success, money? How do you bring all those together? Because I know I spent a couple years in Bible school. I've been around, people that, use the title Christians to describe themselves for many years. There are a lot of people that struggle with that. How does it all fit together? Can you just maybe talk briefly about how you bring it together? And I'm not saying we've all got it figured out, but just how do you reconcile it? Because I'm assuming you're pretty successful from a financial standpoint, being in the position you're in.
Well, it's all relative. I've obviously been very blessed to be in the position I'm in now. But I would say that, we're all wired a bit differently. We all have different drives, motivations. People listening probably are familiar with the Enneagram and the different numbers and characteristics. I happen to be a 3. So that's a successful achiever, I believe is what they call that. So that's kind of how God created me. And one way to keep score on achievement is financially. And so that just always in many ways has been a battle for me in terms of not allowing myself to make that the highest priority. And, that's sort of a daily, I wouldn't say a struggle, but something to be aware of for me. I will say that, many people familiar with the Bible or not will quote, money is the root of all evil. That's
misquote.
a quote
You mean
we all
like
hear.
misquote, right?
That they will misquote, right? And so we know that in the Bible it says the love of money is the root of all evil. With the idea, from my understanding, being that if we put money above all else and make that sort of an idol in our lives, then yes, that creates lots of evil and lots of negative repercussions. But I think that as a person of faith, money is a resource. Nothing more, nothing less. If you're able to use it in a way that is, furthering the kingdom of God in one way or another, then I think it's a very positive thing. And if you're doing the opposite, then I think it can be very, very dark and negative. So I'd say that's kind of the only way I think about it.
Yeah, that's good. I'm gonna jump into the book and ask, and I'll have a number of other questions related to the book, but I want to go to this first. And in my digital copy, it was on page 53. I don't know which chapter it is, but it's something to the effect of, earlier I mentioned my own battle with anxiety and self-doubt. This is you talking, your words.
Oh, yeah.
For much of my life, I experienced a lack of self-worth that created this chemical makeup. Now, when someone sees doctor, when someone sees coach, when someone sees someone in the position you're in, and they look at you, you're, handsome young man and all that kind of stuff. Many times it's hard to reconcile battle with anxiety and self-doubt. I think that's the place that I want to go into the book, is you telling a little bit about that, because I think that's probably, maybe it's not, maybe it is a catalyst for putting the book together. If I'm wrong, you can let me know, but talk a little bit about that sentence that's, again, digitally page 53. I don't know what page it's on in the physical book, but talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was one of the major reasons I did write the book is, that's the truth. I mean, it's, there are battles I've had in my own life that, the longer I'm a Christian, the longer I try to follow Jesus, the more people I get to know that are also Christians, the more I realize we all struggle. And all of our struggles are unique, and they're different from one another. One of mine has been, kind of this battle with, I was diagnosed with what they call generalized anxiety, which is a very vague term. When I was in dental school, but I'd battled it a long time before that. I just never really did anything about it. I just kind of thought, well, just whatever, just tough it out, white knuckle it, get through it. And that you can do that. I mean, I think you can live your life that way. But I also think that
those are the examples you saw with your father and your grandfather. That's what they did, right?
That's right. Yeah. And having gone through this myself, I now know, that my own dad has dealt with a lot of these same things. And he didn't know it, either he didn't know it or wouldn't acknowledge it. And I mentioned intentionally, the ADHD thing earlier, and the reason I did is because that is, adult ADHD, for those that don't know, is significantly different in presentation than it is for kids that have ADD. For kids, they're usually super hyperactive and they're usually, bouncing off the walls and you can't get them to sit still. For adults, it's much more complex than that. It's, more difficult for adults with ADHD to engage in relationships. It's very hard for them to, finish projects. And there are a lot of repercussions, socially and otherwise to ADHD. So my dad and I both, basically have the exact same personality in that way. And in many ways, I think it's made us both very successful, but it's also caused a lot of pain and challenge in relationships and other things in our lives. And so when I look back on that anxiety part in my life, I think the ADHD actually was sort of the main driver, of all that stuff. And people that have ADHD have high incidence of depression, anxiety, alcohol abuse, things like that they use as as coping mechanisms, very high levels of addiction. And so all that to just say that, I think we all have struggles, and that they don't have to be defining, but number one, we've got to face them, and get help or do what needs to be done to try to overcome those things. And then, also don't be embarrassed or ashamed by them, because, they're not, it's not a coincidence that that's the particular cross that you have to bear in your life, and there's some sort of a reason, and some sort of a learning experience from it.
So one of the things that happens, because I've got this in me too, the Enneagram 3, the success minded, if they have what you're talking about, it seems as if, we talk about dependency and chemicals and things like that. For me, similar to you, for me, success was that drug, was that pursuit.
It is a drug. It's a dopamine.
Was that similar for you?
boost.
I mean, were you chasing? I mean, and listen, I know
Absolutely.
you're a doctor and things like that. You said this first reared up when you were in dental school.
Mhm.
Were you going after things in a way to solve, fix, placate, whatever the right word is, that need?
Yeah, I mean, I think in many ways, and this is all stuff I've learned not long ago, very recently.
Later. Yeah. It comes,
Later.
it
Yeah.
comes to a head later, right?
Yes. Yeah. And so in the moment, I didn't necessarily even know a lot of these things, but majority of my life, up until the present moment, has been based on pursuit of achieving certain things. It was, when I was a kid, it was competitive sports, and that sort of like allowed me to cope with everything else, because I got those dopamine hits, when I would, win or get awards or whatever it was. And then after high school, I didn't play college sports. So then it became academics, and, I was in a fraternity. So those, activities kind of filled that void. And then it was getting into dental school, and then it was getting into residency, which was a big challenge. And then it was starting my own practice, from by myself, and then it was being a good husband and father. And that, and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, well, what's next? What's the next thing? That's the big thing. And that's when I really, for me personally, it started to be more obvious. Okay, something's not right. Something's not right here in the way that I'm living my life, because this isn't how it's supposed to go. And so I had to kind of reevaluate a lot of things, and learn a lot of things about myself, and the hard way, a lot of it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people deal with that. I did something similar that I recognized. I was always looking for what the next thing was, or the next level or accomplishment or achievement. And I wasn't really doing, I'll say this often, I'm not saying that I have it figured out, but I didn't really enjoy the journey. I didn't really take the time to really bask in the moment or the day. And I was always looking at that next thing. Was that similar for you? I mean, it sounds like some similar things.
Extremely. I mean, I wouldn't
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that I remember enjoying any of the days,
No.
to be honest
Yes.
with you.
What's next? And when I get to
Yeah.
here, then I'll slow down.
Yeah. And that's just always sort of been my my MO. And recognizing, that's not how I really want to be. The ideal version of me, using all the information in this book, Redefining the Top 1%, that ideal version of me is not that way. And so a lot of the things I learned in writing the book are, were very much caused a lot of self-reflection, and we're very much like, you're really calling yourself out here, on these. I mean, you're going to write a book like this, like you're going to have a target on your back. because people are going to say, well, you're the author of this book, do you do all these things? And so I knew that was a risk. But for better or worse, I went ahead with it.
Yeah, because, you start putting things on paper and there's this thought, or you speak or you do podcasts or anything like that. People have this thought that you're the expert.
Sure.
And to me, you tell me if this wording is wrong. It seems like redefining the top 1% was almost a roadmap, a guide for Trevor, and you're just kind of allowing the rest of us to kind of be in on it.
Yeah,
kind of what I'm hearing you say.
I'd say that's extremely accurate. Yeah. And I'd be curious to know, I'm not sure how many would admit this, but of the most successful personal development teachers and authors over the course of time, I'd be curious to know, in the deepest part of their heart, how many of those were writing to themselves, in many ways, like, yeah, you're famous and you're successful and these concepts and you're teaching them, but how much of this is also for you,
Yeah.
But that's not something people talk about a lot, on the speaking circuit, and otherwise, but
No.
but that's, my experience with human beings, that would probably be the case.
Okay. So that's powerful. And unfortunately I'm looking at my time here, but we just brought something up that would be so fun to go down. It appears as if many people that are in this arena, leadership, personal development, self-help, all of this, we set ourselves up to be hypocrites. It's almost like we position ourselves by stating, do this, this is the way to do it. But I love your approach. You talk about humility in the book, which is, I think, one of the keys to any type of success. I love that redefining of success. But, and you brought up something that I think is so powerful that I've just experienced. Sounds like you experienced. I'm not so sure that these books aren't for us as much as if not more, for anybody else to read if they want to. What are your thoughts on that?
I really think that's the case. I mean, at least in my experience, that's for sure the case. And I just would be surprised if that's not the case for many authors. Because you do so much work, you pour your heart and soul into these things, and you sincerely want them to benefit other people. But you're learning so much about yourself through the process that inevitably, you're going to have things in the book that you don't necessarily attain on a daily basis. And so, and I do think I did get the sensation that I was sort of setting myself up to have a target on my back as the author of a book like this.
Sure.
But I think as a leader, you kind of, that's something you accept that, that's part of it, is knowing that, if something does go wrong, you're on the hook, and that's part of the responsibility and the privilege of being in a leadership position.
And we've got the ultimate example of that, which is Jesus Christ, which he obviously set himself up. He nailed it, because that may not be a good term, but you know what I mean. He got it right.
I do. He did.
And that came out.
He literally did.
He literally did. But listen, there's so many cool things in the book. And I think what I'd love, because you actually go through a number of behaviors, I think there's 7. What I'd love to do in the time we've got, I'm watching it because I know you actually mentioned you've got a patient you've got to get to. We don't want to delay them.
I do.
Can you give me, maybe let's just hit one of the behaviors, and then I'll ask what you want someone to get from the book, and then we'll begin wrapping up. Maybe just talk about one of the behaviors. And I've gone through a good portion of the book, so I'm not going to pin you down. Just kind of share one based on the way you're feeling the conversation's going.
Well, I mean, the two that come to mind immediately based on our conversation are number 1 and number 7. Number 1 is embrace radical responsibility. And that's so foundational, I think, to any learning experience, but any person in a leadership role is, it's very obvious, but not necessarily, very easy to practice on a daily basis, is really accepting every single outcome that happens on your team or, in your family. If you're the leader, you are ultimately responsible for how you move forward from that. You that doesn't mean, I don't think that you created the situation every time, because logically that's not obviously not true, but it is your responsibility how to handle it and how to move forward in a positive way from it. And I think a lot of that is mindset. Mindset is a buzzword that people use a lot in the personal development world, and I think probably too much, but I do think it is very important. And I do think in this particular arena as a leader, the mindset of one that is ultimately responsible for everything that happens is super powerful, and you can't really build anything else on that on a foundation is anything less than that. So that's number one, and the rest of them sort of build on that. Number 7 is be still and know. And that's just the from the book of Psalms, and the idea that I think it's important for leaders to realize that there's something bigger, there's a bigger picture, and they're working for something larger than themselves. And that in a nutshell is what behavior number 7 discusses. And it's not, Christian per se, although there are a lot of references to Jesus and other biblical stories in the book. But it is, I think it is important for, in many ways, a leader to have a spiritual side of themselves that recognizes that there is a greater power. And without that greater power, we as human beings are limited. And things like prayer and recognizing our own limitations, I think, are very powerful and important parts of being a good leader.
Yeah. The good thing about that also, and let's just even remove the spiritual, which is hard to do, is that be still kind of circles back to what you and I were talking about earlier, that our personalities, that Enneagram 3, the person that's go, 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 trying to get to whatever next, is just to slow down and be still and be quiet and listen. And it's kind of hard to know if you're moving all the time. It's kind of hard to know if you're always stretching for that next thing, right?
Very hard, and not an easy concept to swallow if that's your natural personality type. Is that driver, but it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Trevor, this has been so good. What I'd love to ask, just a few things kind of as a wrap up here. Who's this book for? Who do you think should pick this book up? What type person, what individual? Give us I don't know anybody, but like, where would they be now, and what would they be thinking if this person says, what, this book is something you really need to get?
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody that aspires to be in a position of leadership at any point in their life, particularly those that maybe are almost to the point in their life where they're going to be, either a coach or in a managerial position or a parent, having any sort of a role of influence over other people, directly or indirectly. I think this book is for that person. So that does cover a lot of people, I think. But I think there's a lot of actionable ideas. I think there's 34 or 35 exercises incorporated into the chapters of the book, where you kind of stop and you actually like write something down or do an activity. And that's the part of the book I think that is very powerful. And if people take the time to do it, if you adopt a third of the exercises into your daily routine, I think that could be certainly worth your time and energy to check out. And again, they're all scientific or research-based ideas. That's something I came up with. There's scientific literature backed ideas, and so I think that's the key component of the book.
Yeah, I love, and I hope this doesn't drive people away, but I love when you kind of got into quantum physics and string theory and things like that. It's like, wow, he's going down a good deep path here. So, don't let that scare you. If you're sitting there listening,
don't let it scare you. It's actually a fun part of the book. It's really actually pretty fascinating. Yeah.
Fun, maybe. I mean, all right. So we'll include it in the notes. We'll include it in the notes, but where do you want people to go? If someone's sitting here going, man, I need more of this guy, Trevor, I want to connect with him, or I want the book, where do you want to send people? We'll include it in the notes so they can find it if they want to look later.
Well, certainly. Thank you for that. The book is available anywhere, Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes and Noble, any of the online retailers. Also, our website is just drtrevorblattner.com, drtrevorblattner.com. And if you want the book and a free audiobook with it, a free version of the audiobook and a free workbook, all you have to do is go to the website and click on the little book link, or go to drtrevorblattner.com/book-bonus. That's the key page, landing page, and you just order the book there, and you put the little digits in, and you'll get the audiobook and the workbook for free.
Yeah, I love that. And I used to be just a reader, and I've done digital reading and book, but I've recently my wife has gotten me into audiobooks as we travel around in the RV, and I'm kind of loving that. So
I'm addicted to audiobooks. They're just, you just save so much time. I mean, transit, you can, and then I'm also a physical book guy. So I'll listen to it and then buy the book often if it's good.
So did you read it? Is it your voice?
It is my voice. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
that's good. You got a good voice. You got a good, strong voice.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah. that was something I wanted to do. I thought that was an important thing to do. So it is my voice. And and so that's a free bonus if you order the book.
Nice. We'll definitely put some links in. Go check that out. Trevor, we are Seek, Go, Create. And I like to ask as a final question, which one of those words means more currently? And I know it can change, means more, resonates more with you, jumps out, whatever word you want to use. Seek, go, or create now, and why? That's the final question for you.
Yeah, for me, it's no question seek. At this moment in my life, and it's just the idea that I think we're all on a path, we're all on a journey of trying to do what it is we were put on this earth to do. And for me, I know the big mission, is to grow the kingdom of God, and it is to honor him and treat others the way they should be treated. But I'm currently seeking that one sort of next move, for me in my professional life, personal life, that God's calling me to. So for me, it would be seek.
Nice. Excellent. Thank you so much, Trevor. I'm so thankful and joyful that we were able to have this conversation. And I'm sure if you've been listening in, it's been a blessing to you. I'm going to ask a big favor of you right here. And that is, if you know a leader, if you interact with anyone in a leadership position, I'm going to ask that you share this episode with them. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're watching on Facebook, if you're listening on your podcast platform, right now, think of someone that's come to mind and just reach out and share this. Either take a screenshot, text it to them, send it to them on one of the socials, because I know that this conversation will be a blessing to them, and maybe they'll get the book and go further with it, but at least this conversation will mean a lot to them. So I'm going to ask you to do that. You can do that on some of our socials. We're on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn, all of those places where Seek, Go, Create, but just share this episode. They say the number one way that people are exposed to podcasts is when a friend or someone they know recommends it. So I'm going to ask you to do that, because people that really need to hear this message. Just like it's blessed you, it'll bless them. So thank you for doing that. We're here. We drop episodes every Monday. So definitely subscribe if you're able to do that on your platform. And until next time, continue being all that you were created to be.